So I'm David Dunn, and I'm the president and founder of Kingsbridge Wealth Management.
Great, thanks, David. And just so you know, we'll be using sound bites from
Great.
this piece, so it won't go as a consecutive thing. So, first off, why did you decide to invest in Digital Currency Group? What attracted you to Bitcoin and blockchain?
I think what attracted us initially was just a curiosity. And we're curious people. We have some friends that are in the innovation world in Silicon Valley. And when we heard about it, we just wanted to see what it was and see if it had made any sense. And we had the opportunity 2 years ago while in London doing due diligence on a standard type investment to go to a Bitcoin conference. And it was very interesting, very colorful, a whole different language, but in the end, we came back and said, we think there's something to this technology and to what they're talking about. We're not sure what it is, but we think it is going to be disruptive to a lot of different sectors of our economy. And so then we started off trying to figure that out, and we made a great trip to Silicon Valley. We visited all of the startups at the time. We do some venture capital investing, so we went there saying, tell us your story, tell us why we should invest in you. We came away saying, we're not sure any of these people are going to win, and we don't really know how to choose, the next Google versus a Netscape. And so then we started looking for ways to get involved with people who were also on the same path that we were, and that's where we knew Barry from Second Market from years back dealing with second market type securities, and we just started having the conversation with them about their ETF called Bitcoin Investment Trust. And we were an early investor in Bitcoin Investment Trust directly, which means we own Bitcoin.
Well, now it seems like, as you said earlier, that the conversation's really changed around Bitcoin in the past 2 years. Now everyone's also talking about blockchain. Can you explain a little bit to viewers who maybe aren't familiar with this, what exactly blockchain is, how you define it, and what are some of its applications?
Sure. So the Bitcoin is a distributed ledger blockchain. It's an open source blockchain that is promulgated throughout the world. It's not changeable, and it's permissionless, meaning that it verifies the participants through the use of private keys and cryptography. And it allows people to transfer value peer-to-peer, individual to individual, could be an institution, could be an individual, without having to be in a trusted network or be part of a Visa or a MasterCard or any system or a banking system. And it is an amazing technology that through the security side of it and through the cryptography side of it allows that to take place. Now, the back-end software of that is blockchain. Blockchain is the software that allows that process to take place. And what happens with all technologies is the initial use case, people look at it and say, wow, we could do other things with that. And maybe everything doesn't need to be in a public ledger. The original Bitcoin group were hardcore independent thinkers and independent people who wanted distributed ledgers so that no one person could control the system. They didn't want a government controlling it, they didn't want a central bank controlling it, they wanted it to be open distributed ledger. Blockchain is basically saying, well, this is amazing technology. There's going to be reasons to have private ledgers, permissioned blockchains, just like an internal network at your company, where you're already verified who you are, so we can skip that step. And we can just record our transactions and use our software to solve and solve algorithms and look at things like contracts or transfers of values or ledgers for stock certificates or whatever else it is. So that's a whole side now that has broadened the conversation to say that the blockchain technology may be useful in more ways than the distributed ledger. It may be useful in a combination of private ledger, distributed ledger, and all of the rails that connect all these things could actually make this part of the whole process to digitize assets. We digitized content in media It used to be that the TV was either a live broadcast or recorded on tapes or whatever else, and now it's all digital. Now we're going to digitize assets and value and be able to transfer those the same way that you click on a YouTube video now. And from our standpoint, I would have never believed YouTube would have existed as quickly as it did looking back in 1995 when I was first exposed to the internet. And I think we're at the same point, and I'm not the only one who feels that way, because a lot of people in my generation were around for that first swing. They're looking at this saying, wow, we've seen this before, and we're not sure where it ends, but we know we want to be a part of it.
Right. Well, what kind of interest is blockchain drawing from, like financial companies, from tech companies? What are you seeing?
From our perspective, 2 years ago, people basically said, wow, why would you go to a Bitcoin conference? Are you an anarchist? Are you doing illicit activity that you want to transfer money the government doesn't see? Or are you a scammer? Today, you're sitting next to people from Deloitte, from IBM, from Goldman Sachs, from JP Morgan, from Morgan Stanley, from DTCC, from all of the major players on Wall Street, because the word has gotten out that if you don't understand this technology, you're probably going to get ran over by it. And I think the other major change is the focus isn't on the technical side of the technology anymore. It's focused on the use cases, and the big drop word at the conference was proof of concept. Everybody's got a POC they're working on. You know, I think that's funny. I think the next conference won't have anything about POCs anymore. It'll have to do about the solutions. And the way we look at it is it's the technical side that's going to bring solutions that will change our lives. And do we all need to know the technical side of it? No. If you're interested, is it very interesting, intriguing? Absolutely. In the end, I don't think any of us know how YouTube works or how, you know, how you digitized a video clip. I don't actually understand that personally. So.
Right. Well, let's talk more about not the technology side, but the applications that we may see in our lives. For example, you mentioned the startup Circle and their agreement with Visa. Right? Can you tell me a little bit about that, or give me a few examples, just briefly, that we could point to illustrate
sure.
how this phenomenon may become more relevant in our daily lives?
Well, I have a very personal story on that. So I owned, as part of an investment I made in the past, I owned a MasterCard issuing license and a portfolio of credit card receivables. And I used to get these reports about my card portfolio. And they're from a very large company that actually just went public. And they were absolutely unreadable. I consider myself to be minorly intelligent, but trainable. And you literally needed to go to a class to decipher what their kind of DOS-based reporting told you about your receivables portfolio. When you look at Circle, which is creating private ledgers for a company like Visa, what they would do with the ability to add clarity to Visa transactions. I don't know the exact numbers, but I can tell you there's a large percent of failure rate on Visa transactions. There's a reasonable percent of fraud in Visa transactions. If they can cut that down at all by using a better underlying software technology, they will save billions of dollars. And I don't think that's lost on any of them. And I think now it's a race to see who can get those cost savings first and get a market advantage. And they're all testing this technology, because if you can cut out 4 to 8% of fraud out of your portfolio, you become a lot more profitable. And that's what it comes down to, is the solutions are cutting out the fraud, the exception processing, and the cost of processing a transaction.
Right. Let's shift slightly. I did want to ask you about Bitcoin. I know its value has tumbled. Do you think Bitcoin has lost relevance, or will we eventually see more institutional support for it?
I don't know if Bitcoin will have institutional support. I think Bitcoin will always have a following, and I think it's a very interesting tool to be used as a digital currency, as well as what it brought us, which was the blockchain. We would have never been talking about the blockchain technology the way it's being talked about today in mainstream and on Wall Street without Bitcoin. And I think the Bitcoin evangelist community is a little hurt that people have moved on so quickly from Bitcoin, but they are intertwined. Bitcoin is the original distributed ledger that uses a blockchain. And it's a permissionless system that allows you to transfer value among two parties that don't know each other. And you can transfer value securely and safely, without knowing someone else, without having to do due diligence on them, without having to waste your time to get to know them. And that is still amazing. Has a little less than a $7 billion market cap today. There's lots of use cases where Bitcoin, I think, will continue to be relevant. I look at it as, yesterday someone told me that Amazon issues $10 million per day in Amazon gift cards. That's pretty much an alternative currency. Not everyone's using it. It certainly works for a group of people. That's where I see Bitcoin. I think the market cap will go a lot higher than the $7 billion it currently is. I think that in parts of the world and for international use cases, it will become much more mainstream than it is now, and it will shake off its days of Silk Road and Mt. Gox and illicit dark web transactions.
Great. I mean, do you think one of the challenges is getting other, maybe not necessarily institutions, but other organizations to sign on, like for instance, Amazon or Macy's or whatever, these bigger even retailers or commercial stores to participate?
Yes, certainly growing the volume any way you can grow it, whether it be through retailers or whether it be through somebody using it as a reserve currency. I don't personally find the use case for gold. I don't know what you're going to do with it, if you're going to shave it off and pay people on the street in Times Square. I don't get it. I do get that I can transfer you $10,000 right now on my phone using Bitcoin. And the transaction will be confirmed in about 20 minutes. And you can be rest assured that I had the money and I provided it to you. And I can be rest assured that it went to you. And that is an amazing thing. I was just talking to someone yesterday, a reporter from Hong Kong, and she was telling me it still takes 4 days to send money to Hong Kong from the United States. How can that be? And the system is very ripe for disruption, and Bitcoin does solve some of those issues. The issue with Bitcoin is, will governments and central banks allow a system like this that they cannot control? And this is like the internet. Many countries try to control it. I think it's a losing battle. I don't think you can control a distributed ledger like Bitcoin, and they know that. And so will they try to block it or slow it and encourage it not to be as mainstream? Yes, I can tell you that Bitcoin, when it first came about, didn't have Know Your Customer rules and OFAC, and every Bitcoin company operating has those now. In some senses, if you talk to people who are doing business in Africa, they'll tell you that their Bitcoin company that moves money around via Bitcoin is way more in compliance than any bank in their area of operation. There's a great firm called BitPesa, and she tells an amazing story about that, and it's true. So they're on the bleeding edge of bringing costs down to transfer value amongst people globally.
Right, it seems like almost in those or more developing parts of the world, or we don't have those institutions we can rely on, that there may be more of a market for it.
Well, and that's correct. So even here, if you look at the difference between the United States and Europe, Europe's much more trusting in the government than the United States is. We're all in the westernized worlds, we're trusting of institutions. You will give your information to JP Morgan or Citibank or whoever openly, and you have a high belief that you will not be scammed or robbed or treated poorly. And so people who don't have those trust in institutions and don't have already those existing systems may be more open to something like Bitcoin, as long as they see that it works. And I think they're seeing that it works, and the truth is the volumes, although they're not where the Bitcoin community wants them to be, they have steadily risen, and there's more and more applications for Bitcoin created every day, and I do think that it'll have a place, and it'll continue to be a valuable technology and valuable currency for certain parts of the world. If I lived in Venezuela, I would put my money in Bitcoin. There's no question.
Great, and then lastly, it's just for my own personal verification here. So the Bitcoin and the blockchain, they exist separately, right? You can have the blockchain without the Bitcoin. I know there was some talk about this at the conference, right?
Certainly. So blockchain is the technology. It's the software that runs Bitcoin. Bitcoin is You know, in both sets there has to be a key that agrees upon the transaction where it's put onto the chain. Bitcoin is that key, and there's only going to be 21 million of those keys issued, and it's dividable up, I think, out to 10 decimal points. It's either 8 or 10 decimal points. So you can split each piece of the blockchain, and this is where people got excited in the beginning, because they thought, wow, I can own a piece of the internet. If there's only going to be 21 million pieces of the internet, and everyone will have to write something that works within those pieces, I can own a piece of that, and as people use it more and it becomes more in demand, the price and the value of that piece will go up. You could picture it like, in the old days, a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. And that's where people got very, very excited. You have a seat on the system. You can trade that seat, you can sell that seat anytime, you can use that seat to transfer value. The way I look at it also, that people, and this is where us non-tech people lose cognitive ability to understand, is that you're young. So when the phone first came, you had caller ID, and all of a sudden it would tell you on a little screen what number the person dialing was from. That was a digital tag on an analog line. Well, this is a digital piece of information which you can attach almost anything you want to it. So you could attach your whole record of your birth certificate, your life, everything there is, and post it to this ledger that no one can read without your key. So there's so many different layers of the distributed ledger technology. You could access it from anywhere in the world and prove who you are. But one of the things that we're still working on that's the strongest use case is security and identity. And we need to solve that. And you know, right now it's all based on private keys. But what happens if you forget your private key, or if there's no bank to go to prove who you are, and they'll say, oh, I'll reset your password. So this is an issue. There's no arbiter. There's nobody to stand in the middle and do that. It is a distributed open ledger system with no one who controls it. And so if you lose your key, you've lost the Bitcoin that are in that account. And no one's ever hacked the keys. They've stolen the keys. And they found them on random hard drives and computers and things, and been able to get coin that way. But the cryptography behind that part of the technology appears to be very, very solid. And so that's the interesting part is, and we have to kind of fix that a little bit to say, would you put $10 million in Bitcoin and have that private key on your person? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people who would want to get to that key, right? Would you write it down? What if you forgot where you put it? What if your safe gets robbed? What if your house burns down? Who can go back and open up that for me? And that's the hard part. You get to multi-signature and a bunch of people working on different things like that, and those are all iterations that will have to happen.
Maybe memorize it and is that the
Okay, but then what happens if you get Alzheimer's?
Right, I guess you gotta tell a couple people, right?
Okay, and now what if those people, you know, that's where multi-sig comes in. Maybe it takes 3 people to get to large amounts, right? I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, now you understand how you go down these rabbit holes and how people get confused, and cognitively you start thinking, wow, what do you mean there's no one who can reset my password? I think once a week, I have to get my password reset on some system. We're on too many private ledgers out there, too many private software systems, and I can't keep them all straight. You know, so I think that's a challenge, and that's something interesting. And is there a fail-safe way for you to prove your identity? Is it a password plus biometrics? Is it a consensus thing where if you can explain enough things about your background that they'll come up with a coefficient for how comfortable they are that you are who you say you are? And if you hit a certain number, then you're verified. I've heard a lot of different ways of doing that. If you can verify all these different information sources about you that are available for them to do, and that's in fact what they're doing in third-party authorizations now from a lot of banks, is they'll ask you something on your credit report for me, it's hilarious because they asked me an address that I lived at when I was in college. And I know it now, but I'll be honest with you, I had to kind of guess the first time because I don't remember the address from that long ago.